Hey, Sisyphy here. Today we are going to look at Canon M6 Mark II. And if you have been a long-term follower of my channel, you would know the fact that I am using Canon M50 with the Sigma 16mm lens as my main shooter for the studio shots. But I recently have introduced this camera because I thought things might have improved in terms of usability. So I thought, why not try out and tell you all about it. By the way, I did do a very detailed comparison between Canon M5 and M50. I'll leave a link in the description for you guys to check that video out as well. Anyways, I am always looking for some means of improvement, and I thought Canon M6 Mark II would be the right solution for that. I actually bought this camera used and body only, and I paid about $750, and I think it's a fair price. If it was a brand new camera, the asking price for that would be $850, I believe, and then with a kit lens it will go for $1,100. So it is not necessarily like the cheapest camera that you can get, so you do want to ask, is it really worth it? So if you're wondering the same thing, then hop along and I'll do my best in answering that specific question. And as a bit of warning, I do want to warn you that this video may be quite long because I have quite a long note over here, and I will nitpick on things that only matters to me perhaps. So I hope this video is somewhat useful for you. Just let me know down in the comments whether you liked it or not, then I'll know for sure how you guys feel about my video. And another piece of warning is the fact that I will leave out a lot of specs or numbers about this specific camera because I want to approach from more of a usability and a practical usage point of view. My primary usage of this camera is actually YouTube videos, not really photos all that much. I do use for photos occasionally, so I'll speak for it just a little bit, but my main focus would be the video production with this camera. And because I have been using Canon M50 for quite a long time, and I just introduced Canon M6 Mark II into my workflow, so I will inevitably compare those two cameras, so please do understand that part as well. And whether it be the camera or the accessories that I mentioned in this video, we'll have a link in the description for you guys to go ahead and check it out yourselves. And those are going to be the affiliated links so that you guys purchase without any additional fee. However, it has a little bit of kickback for me to support my channel. So I would really appreciate if you guys were to purchase things through those links if it interests you. So as a starter, let's look at the body and the exterior of this camera. One of the reasons why that I liked Canon's crop sensor is because of its compact size. And the overall build of this camera is actually plastic, but it does feel quite solid, so I really like about that. And the general handling is quite nice, and I have nothing to complain about that. My hands are pretty small size, but the grip is nice, and I have no problem handling this around, and I really favor the compactness of this camera. And one of the things that I do have to mention is the fact that the mounting point, the 1/4-20 thread, is actually in the middle of the camera. It is quite close to the battery door, so if you mount anything, it may actually prevent you from opening the battery door or taking out the SD card. So you need to be mindful of that. Either you get a very small head tripods, or you get a quick release plate like this one that I have featured in my previous video. This is a Falcam F38 quick release plate, which is quite small. And then this one you can kind of offset a little bit to the body of the camera, so you can kind of slide a little bit so that it avoids the battery door. So just kind of open it like this, that kind of touches, make sure it is in a good place, and then you just lock it in place. There is absolutely no problem opening the battery door, and then you can take out the battery or the SD card for that matter. And you can also mount this to any sort of tripod that accepts Arca Swiss plate. So that is useful for any Canon crop sensor mirrorless cameras such as Canon M50 and M6. So I just wanted to mention that. The next thing that I want to talk about are the buttons and dials. It has fair amount of buttons and dials. You got 3 different dials. There is the main one, and then the ones that you can change the camera shooting mode, and also the multi sort of the dial that is available. And also on the back there is additional one that you can scroll through, so that there is plenty of dials for you to turn and change the exposure with, and that becomes really convenient whenever you're trying to shoot with this camera. It doesn't have a record button like M50 on the top. However, you can see the multi-function button. You can change that to start record button, but I actually prefer to use the shutter button to start recording. I don't see why not. So there is a setting for you to change so that you can use the shutter button as a start recording button, which works out pretty nicely. It is quite often that I have to change the exposure, either increase the ISO or higher the number of aperture in the field, especially when I'm doing sort of the handheld vlog type of shooting. Here in the studio, you don't have to do that much because I have controlled lighting. However, if I'm outside, the lighting changes all the time. So it is important that you have access to all of these dials so that you can change the exposure quite quickly. And you probably know this already, but the lens system is EFM mount. So if you have any of the lens that uses EFM system, then you can just mount it on here. One of the really good lens that I shoot with, which is what you are actually seeing me through right now, is a Sigma 16mm with aperture of 1.4, and it gives me really wide angle as well as with a shallow depth of field. It is quite sharp for the area that it is in the focus, and you can see that portion of my background is blurry, and it is about 8 feet away, and it still is quite good. So I really like this lens, but I also use the kit lens whenever I do a vlog type of shooting or handheld shot shooting, because this one has image stabilization whilst that lens does not. This is compact and much lighter, so whenever you're carrying your camera around, I prefer to use the kit lens, which is 15 to 45 mil zoom lens, and it just kind of collapses to much smaller form if you want it to, and then you can zoom with. And I really like this lens. If it wasn't for having a shallow depth of field, I wouldn't really mind using this, but the Sigma lens does give me quite a good shallow depth of field effect. And if you really want to, you can use other type of adapters for you to go from EF or EFS lenses to Canon EF-M mount. So this is what I'm using. I have few EF and EFS lenses that I adopt to this camera, but none of them actually have image stabilization, and this kit lens has one, so that is definitely the difference, and I prefer to use this one because it came with Canon M50, therefore it was kind of free. The next one I want to mention is the viewfinder, and evidently this does not have one. And is that a big problem? No, not really. I rarely use EVF or the viewfinder on my Canon M50, especially for video usage. It's not really useful to do video like this, and also it's not really useful all that much because I do studio shots like this, and certainly you can't really look through the EVF when you're holding up the camera. So only occasionally when I'm doing photo and outside where it is really bright and I just want to be really focusing on the specific area, I would use EVF, but those are the only occasions that where I found myself needing to use the EVF. However, if you are a type of person who uses EVF frequently and you really need one, then you can actually get the kit that has EVF on it. So you can just attach to the hot shoe and actually look through it, or you can actually purchase that separately. However, it is quite expensive if you were to purchase separately, and I also don't really like the fact that it just sticks out and it's just another thing that I have to carry that I don't really need, and I'm more of a type of person who likes to carry much less stuff if possible. I would say if you're a type of person who uses EVF a lot, then look elsewhere. This is not really meant for that sort of purpose. And for the years that I have spent on Canon's crop sensor mirrorless, I really like the fact that you can just touch to navigate through their menu system, and even for shooting, you can also change your exposures and such by touching your screen. And I have no problem with their overall screen size either. However, the flip up screen of Canon M6 Mark II is something quite unique, whereas on the Canon M50 it used to flip out onto its side. And because I use this camera primarily for vlog type of shooting, and perhaps sometimes I stand behind the camera and shoot from the back as well, but the fact that I can just look at the screen whilst I am shooting myself is quite important. And in my humble opinion, so I'll use this M50 as an example, I'm currently looking at the lens, so I'm making an eye contact with you guys. However, if I look away and look at the screen to kind of gauge my shot, it is a bit more jarring and distracting to the viewer. But if it is something that is on top of the camera, it is not as noticeable. So I think having the lens on the top is more preferred, as that motion is not as distracting. Obviously, you can just train yourself to look at the darn lens instead of the screen, but I seem to kind of struggle with that. And because of that reason, I think having the screen on top is somewhat helpful, but it definitely is not helpful if you were to mount the microphone on top of your camera where the hot shoe or the cold shoe is. However, as a YouTuber, you're almost expected to mount a microphone on the cold shoe spot. Your screen is going to be downright blocked, doesn't even come up all the way, and you can't really see yourself having a microphone in front of it. And is that really a design flaw? Actually, there's a lot of cameras that are designed this way. The Sony cameras, they solve this problem by introducing different type of bracket to the camera, and either on top or the bottom. And my first line of thought was to actually do the bottom bracket to offset the microphone, which is this bracket right over here. Take out this quick release plate, you put it at the bottom of the camera. It doesn't really block the battery door, which is a good thing. And as you can see, you can open up the battery door without a problem. And it even includes this sort of magnetic key so that you can unscrew the thread, and it allows the cold shoe to be offsetted to on the bottom side as well as on its side, so either here or here. Let me show you that. So either you can mount it onto here like so, or to its side. And also there are additional threads at the bottom where you can take the tripod like this and then basically thread onto here so that you can hold out and basically do the whole vlog setup like this. But something that I have noticed is the fact that there's not really a way to lay this down. So if I lay it down like that, it actually puts strain on the microphone, and you're more likely to do it this way. And if you don't use the tripod like this and try to put it on the floor, again, this is going to rest on the microphone side, so that's not really nice. And I don't really like the fact that it just dangles so far out from the camera. I don't know, I thought it is going to bump somewhere and break quite easily. And if you were to do it here, then it gets a little more worse since you can't really rest your camera in any way. And I can't really utilize the quick release plate that I showed you earlier. So I didn't really like this one all that much for those two reasons. On the other hand, I have another bracket, which is a top bracket, and it looks kind of weird. What it does is the fact that it goes onto the cold shoe mount point, and I have to use Allen wrench in order to do that. So let me get that out, which is kind of annoying. It's gonna be quite a troublesome thing if you were to try and undo or redo this bracket. And also there's going to be additional hook over here for you to hook your camera strap if you need that. But there's going to be one additional cold shoe up here, which is more expected place for your camera. It's just that it covers some of your dials that are in that place, so it could kind of feel cramped, and actually it's harder to press this multi-functional button that is on top. That's something for you to watch out for depending on how you mount the microphone exactly. You may or may not be able to get to those buttons. Right now I can press down both of the buttons if I wanted to. However, it is visually covered, and it also depends on how far you mount your microphone on this cold shoe spot. And one of the benefits that this bracket has is the fact that it works as a cold shoe cover. So there's no dust that's gonna gather up because of this bracket. So this is another SmallRig bracket that is meant to be used on the top of the camera. And that is actually what I have been using instead of the one at the bottom. And on the bottom, I rather use the quick release plate or nothing at all if you were to use just one of these small tripods. So this tripod from Manfrotto allows the battery door to be open and the battery to be taken out. So I don't think it's by design, but it is just small enough to allow the battery door to open. And another way that I wanted you guys to be aware of is the fact that sometimes on the tripod it has a little cold shoe spot. So this MT16 from Ulanzi or Ulanzi, you have a tripod which is kind of plastic construction, but you can just basically mount it to the bottom of the screen, and this allows the battery door to be opened as well. But one of the thing is the fact that it has a cold shoe mount on its side. So I can actually take this microphone and then basically mount it on here. So this is what you are able to set up. You don't need additional brackets. The microphone gets mounted onto the tripod itself, and that is good. Actually, the microphone jack is on this side of the camera, so you're gonna have to flip that around. And obviously you can do that and then flip the microphone as well. So the overall construction is plastic rather than metallic, and I think it is a good thing because it maintains the light weight. If it is metal, it's not as light as this tripod. However, it can kind of feel clunky as you carry this around. And another thing that I like about this tripod is the fact that this kind of extends as a selfie stick. So you can kind of extend quite out. However, the notch on the ball head for you to have the camera at an extreme angle is on the opposite side. Therefore, once you do this, then the microphone is going to face completely outward from you, and there's not really a good way for you to turn the microphone and face you. And again, this one now is on the opposite side of the microphone jack. That's something that you're gonna face if you were to use the cold shoe that's on the tripod itself. But I wanted you to be aware of this option if you really wanted to avoid the bracket option that is on the camera. So all in all, I found this method to be the best option for me, at least, to mount the microphone. I have the microphone jack on this side, and then the cable connected over here, and with a small tripod like this. Obviously, this method itself, it has some flaws that you can't really flip the screen without conflicting with the microphone line, and the bracket on top does kind of limit the usage of some of these dials depending on the positioning of the actual microphone itself. And also when the screen is actually up and turned on, all of the exposure menu is at the bottom of the screen. It's really hard to reach that with my fat fingers because it's already kind of covering a little bit. But then I also have other dials that are available here to change the exposure, so I use that instead. So that's what I have been kind of relying on. So you're just gonna have to pick your poison in terms of how to mount your microphone. And another method which I wanted you to consider, and this wireless microphone kit is something that I have showcased on my previous video, so I'll also leave a link in the description, and it has a little clip on its back. So the microphone side could clip onto your shirt for the vlog type of setup, and then actually the clip could clip onto the screen bracket. So I can just kind of move this a little bit to the back and then basically mount onto the side of the camera like so. And then basically then I don't really need this microphone, and then just connect it. That becomes really nice setup, as long as you're willing to talk to the microphone that is mounted on you. But actually that's going to be a lot more helpful on a noisy environment, and you can count on this microphone to pick up quite well when you're doing sort of the vlog setup and there's no sort of fussiness about the additional bracket. So that's something that you can absolutely do in terms of the setup, and it actually becomes a bit more compact as well. So the next thing that I want to mention is the power of this camera. What I mean is the electricity or power and battery of this camera, or perhaps charging as well. We live in the day and age where we charge a lot of our devices through USB, and that is frankly the area where I feel a lot of Canon cameras have been lacking a lot. For example, my Canon M50 cannot charge via USB in body. So in body charging is something that Canon cameras kind of seem to lack. And thankfully, Canon M6 Mark II have introduced the USB-C cable on its side, and you can charge with this port over here as long as it has a good output of power delivery. And this USB-C cable that I have has 90 watt charger on its other end. So as long as you connect the USB-C, there's going to be a little LED that comes on right there and telling you that it is actually being charged. So that is good, but Canon kind of recommends their OEM power delivery port that is very expensive. That's something that you can avoid by investing on some of the power delivery chargers. Over here I have a charging brick from RAV Power, and it actually delivers 100 watt of power delivery, and it has no problem charging this device on top of charging my laptop as well. But there's actually a catch. If you were to charge your smartphone, you don't have to turn off your phone. This camera doesn't allow you to charge the camera if you don't turn off the camera. So which means that you can't have a continued power onto this camera if this camera is actually operating. So in order to have the continued power so that you can do some sort of video stream or continued video shoot like this one, I'm gonna have to hook up a different dummy battery on the battery slot and then use this little slot that Canon offers for you to connect the power, and which is what I have done on my Canon M50. In order to do that, it kind of makes sense if the camera battery doesn't charge in the body, but you're gonna have to still do that even if this camera actually has an in-body charging. I don't know, this is kind of weird to me in terms of usability, and I don't know why Canon just cannot have in-body charging, first of all, across all cameras. I don't know why you limit that just when it is turned off. That's just a little weird to me, but that is the reality with Canon M6 Mark II. I would have really appreciated if you were to just connect the USB-C onto this camera and transfer the data, as well as feeding this camera with power during the shoot. And most likely these power delivery cables are coming out of your wall. And unless you have some sort of bypass system, this is connected to your wall and it cannot transfer data. But this single USB-C cable is meant for data transfer as well. If you were to try and connect this camera as a webcam onto your computer, you're gonna have to connect this USB-C, and basically I cannot do that. It requires power delivery and no kind of charging through regular USB-C. So this specific cable actually is connected to my computer, but it does not have power delivery output. So if I were to connect this camera, it is going to start transferring data off of this camera, but not really going to charge anything to this camera because this is too weak in terms of power. And again, it only transfers data when the camera is on. So depending on how you have switched on or off, you're gonna do either of one, not two. So the subject is changing to overall connection of this camera. On M50 you had micro USB, which is kind of finicky in terms of the connection, and the longevity of the actual port wears out very quickly, whereas USB-C is rated and more durable than micro USB. It is actually good to see USB-C, however it is only one port for power delivery, charging, and then the data transfer to your computer. So you are kind of expected to change this out depending on how you are intending to use that cable or the port for. Really complicated stuff, but to actually complicate the matter even further, I have this product from iNasen. I'll leave a link in the description, but there are many different type of these splitter or bypass thing that are available on Amazon. And what this is basically doing is basically merges the power delivery and the data into a one single port. So I can actually connect this computer and also the power delivery port into one, and here in this case it actually has a battery logo and then the microphone logo. This is meant for you to connect your USB-C headphones and whatnot, and basically saying it has a data that is being transferred, but you can just kind of merge them too, so that you connect that to your single port over here. So when your camera is actually off, it is going to start charging, but also when I turn on the camera, then it is going to start transferring the data, and that's what that is telling you that it is doing. So that just kind of alleviates the problem of switching out the port all the time. So when you want to charge, you just turn it off and then it is going to start charging. You can see that the LED light turns on again, and then when you need to transfer the data, you're just going to turn it on and then transfer the data or start the streaming off of this camera. So that is a neat little device that you can purchase for Canon M6 Mark II. Not a lot of people seem to know about this kind of solution, so hopefully that is useful for you. Another complexity that you can actually add is there are some of these magnetic USB-C cable that are available. It's kind of like MagSafe if you're Apple user, and I have a lot of charging USB cables that are magnetic as well. So something like this where you have micro USB here, and then I have this magnetic cable, so I just connect and it's easily connecting, and I don't have to fiddle about trying to orient in the right way. It is going to just connect. However, when it requires power delivery, it becomes a little more complex because it is not as universal. So there is a product that delivers 100 watts of power delivery in this case, and I can actually put this little tiny plug into the USB-C port. So what you need to do is the fact that you just connect this onto USB-C cable over here, and then it is a nice snugly fit there. When you're actually taking it out, you want to be careful not to damage your port. This is because of this USB-C battery door and the way it is kind of inset into the body. It makes it a little difficult to take it out, and I'll be weary about that since we are all concerning about the longevity and the durability of the port, but which means that you can easily connect your USB-C port. So you can just connect this splitter on here. So you can kind of see there is a right angle at the end, and then you can basically snap on there, and it is just going to snap like that and then start charging. Instead of fiddling with a USB-C connection, you can just bring it up close to it, and then it is going to start charging. So that is going to be useful if this camera had accepted the power during the shoot as well. Seemingly that is not something available, but I wanted you to be aware of this cool accessory that is possible to use with Canon M6 Mark II. It's kind of odd that you have to come up with these weird configuration in order to solve the problem that Canon camera has. And other things that I want to discuss are the quality and format of this camera. As I don't really shoot the photos so much, I'm not really going to speak for photo quality all that much, but theoretically Canon M6 Mark II does have much better resolution and the quality of the sensor. Therefore, it is expected to kind of give you the best possible image out of all the Canon crop sensor mirrorless cameras. However, unless you're really zooming in far and just kind of pixel peeking, you're not really going to notice much of a difference in terms of this camera versus the older cameras. However, there are two different formats that this camera offers where none else kind of offers, which is 4K with no crop. On the both Canon M50 and Canon M50 Mark II, neither of them offer 4K with no crop. Regardless of how much they actually market that camera as a 4K camera, it just has a tremendous amount of crop and it is just not really usable. However, this one offers you 4K without any sort of crop, so that is very good to see. So I feel like this camera is truly 4K camera, and it does offer autofocus as well. So there is no drifting of focus like M50. It is going to lock on without a problem. So that actually has come in quite handy whenever I'm needing to up the quality of the video. I can go up to 4K with this camera quite easily. And another format that this camera offers is the 1080p with 120 frames per second. Basically, that is allowing you to do a slow-mo videos, either it be some sort of action, outdoor kind of thing, or product video where you're up close and trying to make that shot quite steady. That is very useful, and I have used that function quite a number of times, and it has come in very, very handy. So I really like those two additional formats that are available on this camera. I think that might be the winning point of this camera. If you're needing to do 120 frames per second 1080p footage or 4K without any crop and autofocus, then this camera is the only one who can do it. So finally, there are a few other points that I want to mention about this Canon M6 Mark II. The autofocus on this camera has been upgraded to accommodate better autofocus than other cameras that are available, and also introduces eye tracking during the video shoot as well. So it is going to be really enabling for vlog type of shooting where it is going to just lock on your eye and not really lose its focus. So until I decide to improve this even further, this is going to stay with me. And if I decide to move up to a different type of system or test out different gears, I'll definitely let you know about my thoughts on those gears as well. So if you have made it this far along the video, kudos to you sticking with me, and I hope you have made some value out of this video. If you did, please like and consider subscribing to my channel to continue watching these type of videos. And also don't forget to leave comments. I like talking to you guys in the comment section. So thank you for watching my videos. As always, I'll see you next time. Bye.